I recognize there's different things you need to express to different people. And a lot of creatives don't realize they do this for their clients, but they don't do it for themselves. They don't like adjust, they don't modulate, they don't figure out what they're trying to say to who and why. And so that's why I do what I do is I help them figure out like, okay, well, how are we approaching this interview? How are we approaching this person? How are you approaching the next client? How are you finding people that are interested in what you do, not what like somebody else does, that you want to copy? Like, what do you bring? What is your specialty? So
look into his eyes. They're the eyes of a man obsessed by
success.
Eyes that mock our sacred institutions. Bedroom eyes, they call them in a bygone day.
Sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. When driven by this desire, men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and creative ability unknown to them at other times. So strong and impelling is this desire for sexual contact that men freely run the risk of life and reputation to indulge in. When harnessed and redirected along other lines, this motivating force maintains all of its attributes of keenness of imagination, courage, etc., which may be used as powerful creative forces in literature, art, or in any other profession or calling, including, of course, the accumulation of riches. Napoleon Hill.
Welcome to the Little Blue Pill for Business podcast, where it's all about getting it up and keeping it up. And yes, we're talking about revenue and profits. We all know that it's about the 6 inches between your ears. So I interview some of the hottest people in the industry that are blowing and going so we can help you get in on some action. So if you like a little tongue in cheek and not just physically, you are in the right place. Today, we are jumping in bed with my most amazing guest, Jamie. Jamie, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome.
Nice. So give us a highlight of who you are, what exciting projects you might be working on, or, if you're a dom or a sub, either one. I'm kidding.
A little background. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So I spent 20 years in the advertising industry as a designer, creative director. I now run a business called Rock That Creative Job. In 2020, when the world was basically going to hell, and everybody was getting laid off and nobody knew, their ass from their elbow, I decided that I wanted to kind of pay it forward and take all the hard lessons that I learned in my career, move it out to the public, specifically creatives, and help them figure out how they can manage the stress, manage the struggle, figure out what how to get jobs, what the right thing is for them. And, and that includes freelancers, people that own their own business, people that work for other corporations. And so I launched this business in the end of 2020, which was kind of crazy. But, it's grown since then, and I coach creatives all over the world. I also do a lot of public speaking. I also have online courses and a lot of content. I do workshops. So it's whatever way I can help people in that industry understand who they are, what they have to offer, the value they provide to others, so that they can find the jobs and find the work and find the clients that really light them up. So, sometimes it's B2B, sometimes it's B2C. It depends on who I'm talking to. But really, a lot of it is, just motivating them to see themselves differently and not just to do what everybody else does. And, in the creative industry, that can be hard because we often compare, and it's really hard to get away from that. So, I really enjoy it. I love just talking to people all over the world. And what I found is, doesn't matter where you are, what you've done, how long you've been in the industry, we all struggle from the same things, which is that kind of self-confidence, just feeling like you're doing the right thing for either yourself, your company, your business. And, just that unawareness of like, okay, is this how this is working? And having been a freelance business owner prior, while I was working in advertising, I recognized that fear. And, running this business is the same kind of thing, right? You don't know what you don't know. So you just keep pulling the thread and you're hoping like it doesn't bunch up at some point. Right. And so that's what I do every day. I love it. And, I'm going on my 4th year now. And been a lot of interesting things happened in sort of didn't anticipate a lot of the growth of my business in the different areas that it's grown in. So So I'm
Nice.
happy to be here and talk about that with you.
Beeps, you can obviously tell that she is blowing and going. So I brought this woman on here. She's awesome. And when it comes to pulling threads, usually they do a lot of other things besides bunch up when we're around here. But I'm gonna go do another place. So you mentioned the corporate. What was kind of give us your background? How did you get into this as your thing?
Yeah. So, I think I started out as a graphic designer, right? I went to school for graphic design, fine art, went for a dual major, came out, wanted to be a graphic designer, really kind of didn't know what was going on. I graduated right after September 11th. So not an awesome time to come out of school looking for a job in advertising. And, I struggled with telling my story, trying to get myself out there, trying to land a job with no experience, right? And so, that kind of started this journey of me figuring out who I was, how I need to present myself to people, what kind of value I can provide, how I need to tell that story, how I need to, connect them to what I do. And I rose kind of through the ranks, went from designer, senior designer, lead designer, art director, creative director, senior creative director, and then eventually head of creative for a $4 billion national organization in the US. And so I worked with a lot of other creative people, and I recognized through interviewing them, through working with them on the side, through, hiring my own team, that like, this is a struggle and people can't seem to articulate their value. And it doesn't matter what they do, right? It's just that they have a thing and they're like, here, do you like this thing? I have it. And they don't tell you why it's good. And so, I always kind of had a business mindset as I was, moving up, having promotion conversations, interviewing for different jobs. And so as I moved through the, advertising, I worked in-house, I worked agency, I did freelance. I recognize there's different things you need to express to different people. And a lot of creatives don't realize they do this for their clients, but they don't do it for themselves. They don't like adjust, they don't modulate, they don't figure out what they're trying to say to who and why. And so that's why I do what I do, is I help them figure out like, okay, well, how are we approaching this interview? How are we approaching this person? How are you approaching the next client? How are you finding people that are interested in what you do, not what like somebody else does, that you want to copy? Like, what do you bring? What is your specialty? So I have felt like paying it forward, like learning all that myself, felt like it made sense to pay that forward and help other people figure that out, because I think it's like a massive blind spot. It's kind of the cobbler's children have no shoes, right? Because we're advertising professionals, we're working with massive global organizations, we're doing these high level campaigns for Nike, Adidas, whoever, and we can't even sell ourselves in a very basic way. And it's like, okay, but we have all these ideas for the client, so why are we not doing that for ourselves? And I think it's that, you can't read the label from inside the bottle kind of thing. You don't know how you come across as a creative person. You just want to do the creative work. You hope that somebody loves it. And so I realized like there's a major sales component to that in my career. And, I want to help people understand that. So I do a lot of like motivational speaking. I do a lot of workshops to help people figure out why they're stuck, why they can't self-promote, and it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. And I recognize that, but it doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted. Everybody has a story to tell, right? And if you don't have a story, then you really don't have, anything for someone to hold on to, especially if you're promoting a business. Like there has to be a story there. Otherwise it's like, here's my thing. You want to buy it? Isn't it cool? Like, no.
So you mentioned earlier that when you were first getting out and trying to get a job and having no experience and going, and to me, that's almost the easiest time. It's like, I have no experience. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm really excited about this, which makes it a lot easier to be able to then to say, hey, I have expertise in this area. When a lot of people are going, well, I don't really have expertise in it, and I have 5 years doing it. And it's like, girl, you got 5 years doing it.
Yes.
Like,
yes. It's
so
totally.
Talk to me about that whole concept of how did they kind of figure themselves out of, I'm an expert in it, when they consider themselves maybe, a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome, right? That's massive. And I have done keynotes on this. Like this is one of the areas that I'm really working on. I'm creating some tools for people to help them like just see themselves differently. And, I think a lot of it has to do with that comparison syndrome. Also, it's like, once we start to compare to another person or another business, then we're like, oh my God, but they're so successful. And what are we doing? But everyone has a different story. Everyone has a unique thing to share. And so what I do is I try to help people get over that by recognizing like what they have is very different than somebody else. And it doesn't matter if you have the same business, if you do the same work, if you have the same clients, if you work for the same company, everybody approaches it differently, especially creative. And that's the whole point, is you're trying to bring people in that have new ideas. And so, to present yourself, like you were saying early on, when you're like, I just got out of college and I have no real experience, that's easy because it's enthusiasm based. But I think what happens is when people move up in their careers, they forget that they still need to have the enthusiasm. And it's like, the work does not speak for itself. You can't just go and show somebody your portfolio and be like, here, isn't this awesome? Like, don't you want to hire me? It's like, no, you have to be enthusiastic about what they have and how you can help and contribute. And I feel like that gets lost in business conversations because people want to keep it very formal for some weird reason. It's like, no, people hire you because they like you. They also respect your skill level, but they need to know that like you're excited and you have excitement and enthusiasm for what they do. So that helps people a lot of times get past the imposter syndrome. If they can recognize that like, yeah, I do love what I do. And why wouldn't I tell someone that? Why wouldn't I be authentic with sharing that story instead of just being like, well, the metrics were blah, blah, blah. And as you can see here, all the analytics, like people go to this sort of stat data driven place, even with creative. And it's like, that's great, but that's only part of the story. The other part is like, how are you to work with? Do you want to be here? Do you want to do this project for me? Whatever it is, whatever you're looking for. And so I feel like that enthusiasm it's not there. And I think part of corporate culture is it kind of gets smushed down a little bit. And so my job is to like bring it back out of the ground so people can feel energized about their careers. Because if you're excited about something, you're happy to tell people about it. But if you're not, you kind of don't want to, right? And then it's like pulling teeth when you're in an interview. You can't answer questions. You don't know what to say. You just kind of sit there. And I've interviewed those people and I'm like, well, that sucks because that person looked great on paper. And now they came in here and just stared at me with like these dead eyes, and it's like, no, I can't sit with you 50 hours a week. Like, right? I want to make sure you're someone who is excited to be doing the work that we're doing. And so that's a big piece of the imposter syndrome, is like building that back up and making people recognize like they have value and they need to be sharing that, because no one's going to want to ask you 1,000 questions to get to know you. You have to like readily present that.
So in today's marketplace, I mean, you have Indeed where they want a one-page resume and hardly give you room for a little cover letter. How do you get that enthusiasm across kind of before you even get into the room? Because once you get into the room, that tends to be a little easier, I would think. We'll go there later.
Yes.
How do you do it on paper?
I think, a lot of it is networking, right? It's all in reaching out, showing yourself as someone who's gone above and beyond, reaching out to, trying to find the hiring manager. If it's an organization that you're interested in having as a client for your freelance business, reaching out, starting to network, starting to connect with people there, trying to understand the world of that organization, what they might need, how you might help them. You're showing yourself as someone who is, again, excited, right? And so if you're applying through, for a corporate jobs, kind of like you said, through Indeed or LinkedIn, whatever those easy apply, which I call the lazy apply, because like never do those because it's all canned messages and then you look like the 400,000 other people who did it. But if you're doing that, there's ways to make your resume interesting, but the cover letter specifically needs to actually sell who you are, because people what they do is they regurgitate the cover letter, or they regurgitate the resume in the cover letter. And they're like, they summarize the resume. It's like, why would I read your cover letter when I could just read the resume? I don't need to read a summary of this. And so the cover letter is actually a sales tool. It should tell things about you that are not present in the resume, because you need to use it as real estate, right? And with creatives, we do have kind of an additional piece, which is the portfolio. So your presence online, your social footprint, your, personal portfolio site, all of your work, how you express yourself, like that's part of the hiring process for creatives. No one gets in the door to have a conversation with a creative director unless we've looked at their work. And same thing with freelancers. You're not going to get a client to be interested in you unless they can see what you do and what you've done for other organizations. So it's really about finding the ways to constantly sell your value. But if you don't know what your value is, you're not going to be selling it. So that's why I help people like find those little nuanced ways, have those networking cold call conversations where you're DMing someone, you're just expressing interest. You're presenting yourself as someone who isn't just looking for money, a paycheck, or, you know, a new client or whatever, some type of revenue stream. You're looking to actually use your skills to help that person or organization.
So when it comes to the creative directors, and like, would you recommend that they have a portfolio of past clients' work and things like that, especially when it becomes kind of, well, I didn't do that work. Like,
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
we made that thing, but I wasn't the one that did the artwork for that. I wasn't the one that did the thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. You have to. And the thing is, it doesn't matter if you did it, if you physically did it or not. And this is something I struggled with as I moved up. It was like, okay, well, I'm representing my team's work, but I'm also the lead for that. So, you know, if you're an art director, creative director, head of creative somewhere, you know, in the beginning, you can have that fear of like, oh my God, am I like plagiarizing? Am I saying I did this? As long as you're clear on the site, as long as you're very clear that you guided the work, that you were providing the creative direction, art direction, that you were, you know, interfacing with the vendors, that you were, you know, a lot of your job is stakeholder management, creating alignment between teams, whether internal or external, right? You're constantly moving the roadblocks, and you're also, you know, you're tasked with the vision. So if you don't have a vision, your team is just going to run around with their hair on fire. So you need to articulate that you have a vision for this project. Here's how it started. Here's what we did. Here's how it came out. And here are the results if you have those, right? So it's all about that clarity and just making sure that you're representing yourself correctly and not saying like, oh, I did all the illustrations and I also read all the copy and I also did all the UX. It's like, no, you didn't. Your team did. But most people in creative director, art director roles, you know, you're aware that like they're not doing all of it because it's obviously a team effort, but you really have to represent that and what your role was in that team.
Nice. When it comes to the people that are working with clients, so it's not necessarily that they're doing the artwork for their company, but they're doing artwork for other companies.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but it's been my experience that some people just don't have the best creative taste and they're the clients, and it's like, oh, they have to be happy with it. And sometimes, you know, they really like their orange and red site, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's part of the creative existence that can be super painful. And that's why the sales component is so important, because if you can't sell your decision making to the person who literally has no way of judging your creative work or the copy, you know, and they want to like wordsmith it themselves, or you know, the classic thing is like, oh, I don't like orange, or can we remove the negative space, or maybe make the logo bigger, right? Everyone in design has heard that 1,000 times. It's like, no, that's not how this works. So you have to have reasoning. You can't go in and let someone just judge it. You have to actually like prepare them and be able to say, okay, this is what I want you to look for. Is the technical copy correct? We're not doing wordsmithing. You just need to tell me, did I get it right? Are these statements correct? And do they reflect your business, right? Like you have to be able to wrangle your clients, whether internal or external. And there's a sales component there. And I think you're more successful as a creative person or a person in advertising if you can do that. And a lot of times we let the account managers do that and like, oh, well, they'll sell it for us. No, they won't. They'll sell whatever they can. And then we have to make it a reality, even if that doesn't make sense and the deadlines suck. And they've already locked that job down. And now your job is to actually make it happen when, you know, in reality, like, oh, that can't work, or that's not how this happens, or like, we need more time for a photo shoot or whatever. So if you are constantly selling what you can do and proving it, you don't get yourself into those kind of corners with your work. And then, you know, you're over promising and under delivering because you weren't able to negotiate that with the account manager or the client directly.
I love it. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you about a Cinderella story of one of your clients. And before we do that, we're going to take a quick break.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.
So I'm excited to hear about a Cinderella story of one of your clients.
Yeah. So I worked with someone about a year and a half ago who was in a pretty toxic job. And we all know that when we're in a toxic environment, mental health suffers, everything suffers, the work suffers, specifically for creatives. You cannot come up with a good idea when your brain is constantly stressed. So this person felt trapped, had been there too long, didn't really know what they, were doing. And we started to work together, and they decided to actually leave the job without another job and really focus on reframing their self-promotion. How do I tell a different story so that I stop getting these toxic work environments? Because what happens is we tell the same story, we get the same thing, right? And we just go into this pattern of terrible bosses, terrible environments, work we don't like. So this person left their job without another job. They spent 3 months focusing on their story, focusing on their portfolio, and focusing on where they wanted to go next. And so we created a plan. And that's a huge part of it. Because if you don't have a plan, you're just wandering the desert, right? You're hoping for water and it never comes. And it's like, okay, we need a direction. So this person actually built this amazing portfolio. We created a story. They ended up at the place that they had been looking for, which was a nonprofit, and they really wanted to get into a lot of social justice. Their focus was to try and give back through what they do. So they ended up getting a part-time role at the nonprofit that they actually used to volunteer for, that they were very involved with personally. And, being connected, doing the networking, kind of pitching themselves as here's how I can help you move forward. And I just got a couple of weeks ago, they contacted me and said, hey, can we have another meeting? Because I've been here almost a year and they want to promote me now. And so it's they're so overjoyed with the switch of their life, just that total 180 where, before we started working together, it was I don't know if I can go to work another day. I can't deal with these people. I feel like my soul is dying. I don't like what I do. I don't like where I do it. I don't like who I do it for. And then, just having that focus, it really makes such a difference, because a lot of times we don't think about how to get out of the situation. We just want out. And so that's really what I love helping people do. And just seeing someone get literally their dream job and work in the space that gives back, that they're so energized to go into every day. It's that is why I do this. That is why I put myself out there and tell all my vulnerable stories about the times that I screwed up in my career, because I want people to know it's possible to change that, but you have to recognize that you're in it before you can change it. So that was a really cool experience to hear about this person just sailing forward in their career and feeling confident and feeling good about what they do.
Well, I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start that journey with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So rockthatcreativejob.com. You can find me there. All the information. I have a podcast, Rock That Creative Job. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm super active there. And I'm also on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, and I have a YouTube channel if you are looking for quick hit how-to short videos on resumes, portfolios, interviews, cover letters, things like that.
Right, love it. We will, of course, have all of Jamie's notes in the show notes. So go ahead and scroll down, click on the links, open up a new browser, because we're not done yet. So, Jamie, I get to ask you, at what point in life did you know you were especially kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Oh my God. Ever since I was a little kid, I think. I mean, honestly, it definitely takes someone who is not afraid to fail and who is just going to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And, I know that's kind of the definition of crazy, right? Is doing the same thing over and over, hoping for different results.
Yeah, especially kind of crazy.
Yeah, it is. And so, I always had that as a kid, and my dad was very entrepreneurial. So I think I saw him try things, start and fail and try new things. And I thought, after working in corporate environments and agencies for 20 years, I thought, I think it's time. I think it's time to actually take all this information, everything I learned as a kid, and put it out into the world and see what I could actually do. Because I feel if you have a vision, you're going to make an impact. You just have to keep walking the path.
Love it. So what was your first endeavor? Was it a lemonade stand otherwise?
What was my first what?
Endeavor.
Oh my God. When I was a kid, I ran a babysitters club. I made flyers and I peddled them all over the neighborhood, put them in every mailbox. And then I had a couple friends and I was basically running a little agency. So I would get calls, and then if I couldn't do it, then I would call them and I would orchestrate that. So I was doing that. I also sold greeting cards door to door. This is all when I was like 9 or 10 years old. I always had a thing. I was like, what else could I make and sell to somebody and like help them or do something? And so, yeah, it was. I mean, but the babysitter club, but that was my first direct mail, as I call it, because it was very direct. It was right from Huffy to mailbox.
Exactly. That is awesome. You've been awesome. Any last pillow talk for our peeps?
I think just if you love what you do and you're not sure where you're at, maybe just take a step back and just look and decide, what do I like? What don't I like? And how can I pull the thread on the things I like? How can I get that clarity? Because sometimes when we're in it, we can't see it, right? So getting that breather, it really does help.
Nice. Jamie, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec, your mistress in business. Thank you for being here today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and invite your friends. We love helping you all get it up and keep it up. We love having you here. Thank you for listening to the Little Blue Pill for Business podcast with your mistress in business, Michelle Nedelec. Why are you still here? Go to littlebluepillforbusiness.com and get your goodies. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to share it with somebody else that you know would enjoy getting it up in business. After you subscribe to the podcast, of course, so you won't miss any future episodes. Now, check the notes for links. Oh, and only tell your wife if she's into this, entrepreneurship. And I'll see you both on the other side.